Why is one of Israel's oldest prophecies now intersecting with a development widely viewed as a modern engineering achievement? The question is not straightforward, and the moment is not random. A national shift is unfolding, measurable, deliberate, and aligned with a structure recorded long before Israel had the ability to reshape its own land. For decades, the Negev remained one of the driest regions of the Middle East. Poor soil, minimal settlement, and almost no agricultural identity. Today, that terrain is changing. Water is reaching areas that previously could not sustain it. Ground once considered unusable now supports cultivation. These changes are documented, tracked, and expanding. The engineering behind the project is significant, but technology is not the point of this analysis. The issue is timing. The land is changing at a moment when the biblical sequence places environmental renewal at the beginning of a broader progression. Scripture presents that progression clearly. Desert regions responding, water appearing where it previously could not, and abandoned places becoming cultivable again. These are not symbolic phrases. They describe outcomes that follow a specific order. What is happening now does not complete any prophetic chapter, but the developments reflect early characteristics noted in those texts: land regaining capacity and regions once static entering use. The shift is measurable and follows the same direction as the recorded sequence. This leads to the central question: is Israel seeing an isolated achievement, or the opening stage of the prophetic pattern beginning to form? The next section examines the event itself and the scale of the transformation underway. The event: Israel's water revolution. To understand the prophetic pattern, the event itself must be defined clearly. What is taking place in the Negev is not an upgrade to existing infrastructure. It is a structural change to a region that remained largely unproductive for most of Israel's modern history. For decades, the Negev was shaped by extreme dryness, unstable soil, and limited human activity. Rainfall was inconsistent. Groundwater was minimal. The land could not sustain long-term settlement or agricultural development. It functioned as a boundary, not a resource. Israel chose to alter that condition. The nation implemented a system that moves large volumes of seawater inland through an engineered canal network. The water is processed through large-scale desalination facilities and redistributed across the region through controlled delivery systems designed for dry terrain. The result is measurable. Satellite records show continuous expansion of cultivated zones. Agricultural sites, orchards, vineyards, vegetable farms now appear along routes supplied by treated water. These patterns correspond directly with the placement of the national water grid. This development is not isolated. It is part of a broader strategy that includes desalination plants, pumping stations, reservoirs, and distribution lines connecting the coast to the southern interior. The scale of the project is national, not regional. The outcome is straightforward. Areas that previously could not support growth now do. Land classified as barren for generations has entered active use. Agricultural output from the Negev is no longer marginal. It is embedded in Israel's resource structure. These changes establish the foundation for evaluating whether the current movement fits the first stage of the prophetic sequence. Scripture begins with land renewal. The Negev now shows measurable signs of that renewal. The next section examines the first pattern recorded by Isaiah: the desert responding. The desert will bloom. The first layer of the prophetic pattern appears in the book of Isaiah. It is recorded in a context where the land of Israel had experienced long cycles of devastation, displacement, and instability. Yet Isaiah described a future moment when the territory marked by dryness and weakness would show signs of renewal. The language is direct and focused on outcomes, not symbolism. Isaiah 35:1 states, "The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the rose." This passage has been examined for centuries. Many interpreters viewed it as a picture of restoration rather than a literal development. The idea of a Middle Eastern desert producing agricultural output on a large scale seemed improbable for generations. Israel lacked the population, the resources, and the infrastructure to influence the condition of its southern territories. For that reason, this verse remained a distant expectation rather than an observable possibility. The situation today is different. The Negev, once identified as a barren zone, is undergoing a clear shift. The region has moved from minimal agricultural use to becoming one of Israel's most productive areas for fruit cultivation. Date palms, vineyards, citrus groves, and vegetable farms have taken root in a location long considered non-viable for such purposes. These results are documented, tracked, and incorporated into Israel's food system. Satellite data from international agencies further confirms the change. The Negev displays consistent agricultural activity along the routes supplied by desalinated water and drip irrigation systems. What was once a region with little measurable productivity now shows continuous patterns of cultivation. The development is not uniform across all areas, but it is substantial enough to alter the economic and agricultural outlook of the region. The significance of this shift becomes clearer when placed within Isaiah's structure. The prophet described the desert transitioning from inactivity to production. He pointed to a moment when land previously associated with dryness would begin to support life. Isaiah's emphasis rests on transformation. The text does not discuss the mechanism behind the change. It focuses on the result. Land that had no capacity to sustain growth will contribute to the nation's future. Another relevant verse appears in Isaiah 32:15. "Until the Spirit is poured, the desert becomes a fertile field." Though written in a broader prophetic context, the statement reinforces the theme of renewal. It outlines a movement in which regions defined by failure take on a productive role. Again, the emphasis lies in the outcome, not the process. Modern developments in Israel align with these descriptions at the level of pattern. This is not a claim of complete fulfillment. The text in Isaiah contains elements that reach further than present circumstances. However, the observable shift in the physical condition of the Negev fits within the trajectory Isaiah outlined. Land once considered non-productive is moving toward active use. This pattern becomes more evident when viewed in sequence. Isaiah 35 presents the desert responding. Isaiah 32 presents barren fields transitioning into functional areas. These passages introduce the idea of land restoring its capacity. When such a transformation becomes measurable in real time, it raises questions about whether the early stages of the prophetic pattern are taking shape. The developments in the Negev are not accidental. They are the result of policy, engineering, and national strategy. Yet the alignment between the outcomes Isaiah described and the outcomes observed today prompts serious consideration. Prophecy often records the destination rather than the method. When the destination begins to appear, it draws attention to the possibility that the initial steps of the sequence are now visible. The expansion of agriculture in the Negev is only one stage of the larger movement. The next stage involves the presence of water in regions historically unable to hold it. Isaiah recorded this component with specificity, indicating that barren areas would one day support flowing water. This forms the foundation for the next pattern, which focuses on rivers in places that had none. Rivers in the wilderness. The second layer of the prophetic pattern appears in Isaiah 41. Here the focus is not on vegetation or renewed productivity, but on the presence of water in places that historically had none. The statement is recorded with direct language and describes a structural shift within the land. Isaiah 41:18 states, "I will open rivers on the barren heights and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water." In the historical world Isaiah addressed, this description had no practical basis. The geography of Israel does not naturally produce rivers in elevated, dry territories. The climate offers little rainfall, and the soil in the southern regions absorbs water rapidly. For centuries, these verses were regarded as either poetic expressions of hope or long-range predictions connected to a future stage of national restoration. They were not viewed as developments that could occur within observable history. The present situation in the Negev challenges that assumption. The introduction of water into the desert is no longer conceptual. It is taking place through engineered channels, pumping systems, and desalination networks that redirect water from the Mediterranean into the interior of the country. These channels extend across long distances and deliver controlled volumes of water into regions that were previously isolated from any consistent supply. The construction of the artificial canal system marked a decisive moment. For the first time, water was moving through the Negev in a structured, regulated manner. The movement was not natural, yet it produced an outcome Isaiah identified: water flowing through locations that could not produce it on their own. This represents a significant reversal of the land's limitations. In addition to the canal system, drip irrigation infrastructure now operates throughout agricultural zones in the Negev. Although the process is highly technical, the outcome is clear. Water is being distributed across wide areas of previously barren soil. Fields that once absorbed any available moisture with no visible result now maintain crops through precise, measured delivery of water. The presence of sustained irrigation aligns with Isaiah's description of springs appearing in dry places. Satellite records demonstrate this transformation. Regions that once recorded minimal moisture retention now display consistent agricultural zones supported by artificial water routes. The change is not uniform across the entire desert, but the pattern is established. Water is present, visible, and integrated into the national system. While these developments are driven by engineering, the prophetic relevance lies in the outcome. Isaiah did not describe the technology of future generations. He described the condition of the land after a shift had taken place. The mechanisms are not the feature of the prophecy. The existence of water in the desert is. It is important to avoid overstating this alignment. Modern water systems are not the fulfillment of Isaiah 41. However, they create conditions that resemble the outcome Isaiah recorded. The presence of flowing water in historically dry regions corresponds to a pattern that has been preserved in Scripture for more than 2,000 years. When placed alongside Isaiah 35, the progression becomes clearer. The first passage describes the desert becoming productive. The second describes water appearing where it once could not. These two movements often appear together in prophetic literature, forming a sequence that precedes additional developments in the land and among the people. This leads to the next prophetic layer, recorded by Ezekiel. Isaiah described the land changing. Ezekiel described the land responding to the return of its people and producing fruit again. His statements are more detailed and extend the pattern further. The next section examines this third stage and evaluates how current developments compare to the structure Ezekiel recorded. The land will yield fruit again. The third layer of the prophetic pattern appears in Ezekiel 36. This chapter presents one of the most direct descriptions of Israel's land changing in response to national restoration. Unlike Isaiah, who emphasized the transformation of barren regions, Ezekiel addresses the broader landscape of Israel and the relationship between the land and the people who return to it. Ezekiel 36:8-9 states, "But you, mountains of Israel, shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel, for they will soon come home. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn to you, and you shall be tilled and sown." This passage outlines a sequence. The land will regain productivity. It will respond to cultivation. It will support those who return. Ezekiel presents this as a coordinated movement involving the land, the people, and a favorable shift in conditions. For many centuries, these statements had no clear route toward literal fulfillment. Israel lacked population stability, agricultural capability, and political control over its own territory. Much of the land remained uncultivated, especially in the southern regions. The idea of the mountains of Israel producing fruit again was viewed either as a distant hope or a future moment outside the reach of the present age. The developments in the Negev and surrounding regions now introduce a new context. Israel has expanded agricultural activity far beyond what was once considered possible. Current data indicates that approximately 70% of Israel's domestically grown produce now originates from areas classified as arid or semi-arid. The Negev, which once contributed virtually nothing to national agriculture, now sustains date orchards, vineyards, citrus crops, vegetable farms, and high-efficiency greenhouses. More than 1,000 agricultural facilities operate in the region today. These include research farms, drip irrigation systems, climate-controlled greenhouses, and advanced agritech sites. The infrastructure is monitored by agricultural institutes and supported by water systems designed specifically for long-term use in a desert environment. The increase in productivity is measurable and continuous. The land is no longer static. It is being cultivated, and it is yielding results in a manner that aligns with Ezekiel's structure. Branches extended, fruit produced, land responding. Another critical component in Ezekiel's sequence is the return of the people. Ezekiel connects the land's renewed productivity with the gathering of the nation. The land produces, "For they will soon come home." This link between population return and agricultural revival is foundational to the chapter. Modern statistics support this relationship. Israel has experienced steady waves of immigration, aliyah, from multiple regions over the past several decades. In some years, the numbers reached levels not seen since the establishment of the state. These returns have created demand for housing, agriculture, and infrastructure across southern and northern Israel. The expansion of agricultural zones in the Negev is partly driven by the need to support a growing population and diversify national resources. Ezekiel 36:34-35 further expands the picture. The desolate land will be cultivated instead of lying desolate. They will say, "This land that was desolate has become like the Garden of Eden." While the comparison to Eden represents the height of restoration, the core statement concerns cultivation. Land that was desolate will be worked again. This is observable in the Negev, where large sectors of previously unused terrain have been prepared, tilled, irrigated, and integrated into national production. These developments do not match the full scale of Ezekiel's vision, but they follow the pattern he recorded: desolation replaced by cultivation. Ezekiel 36 is often recognized as the foundation for the prophetic chapters that follow, Ezekiel 37, 38, and 39. These chapters describe national revival, geopolitical alignment, and future conflict. Yet Ezekiel places agricultural and environmental restoration before these events. The land responding is the first movement. The people returning is the second. The subsequent chapters build on these foundations. The current developments in Israel reflect this sequence. The land is becoming productive in areas that had no agricultural identity. The population is growing. Infrastructure is expanding. These are not isolated achievements. They form a pattern that resembles the opening stage of the progression Ezekiel described. It is important to maintain precision. The events today do not complete Ezekiel 36. They do not finalize any prophetic chapter, but they reflect the early characteristics Ezekiel associated with a renewed land and a returning people. When evaluated within the broader prophetic structure, these movements signal a shift that deserves attention. The next layer moves beyond the land itself and examines a broader statement: Israel influencing nations through innovation and leadership. This forms the fourth pattern found in the biblical record. Israel will become a blessing to nations. The fourth pattern connected to Israel's modern developments concerns its influence on other nations. Scripture records this theme repeatedly. It appears early in the biblical narrative and continues through later texts. The focus is not on dominance or superiority, but on function, Israel serving as a source of benefit to the wider world. Genesis 12:3 records the original statement, "Through you, all nations will be blessed." This declaration establishes a long-term framework. It indicates that Israel would, at some point, contribute something of value beyond its own borders. The nature of this contribution is not defined in the verse, but the direction is clear. The influence would extend outward. A second reference appears in Deuteronomy 28:1-13. "The Lord will make you the head, and not the tail." This passage refers to national positioning. It suggests Israel would hold a leading role in certain areas, rather than a dependent one. The text does not specify the field, but it establishes the expectation of prominence. In the modern era, Israel's advancements in water management and agricultural technology have become central to its global engagement. The country leads in desalination, producing a significant share of its national water supply from seawater. It also leads in water recycling, reclaiming a higher percentage of wastewater than any other nation. Drip irrigation, developed in Israel, has been adopted worldwide and has reshaped water usage in arid and semi-arid regions. More than 140 countries have consulted Israel for assistance in water conservation, irrigation design, and desert agriculture development. Delegations from Asia, Africa, South America, and the Middle East have studied the country's systems and applied similar methods within their own borders. This transfer of knowledge has had measurable impact on food security and water stability in multiple nations. The scale of Israel's contribution in this field is significant. The nation has become a reference point for regions facing drought, soil degradation, and water scarcity. Research institutions within Israel partner with universities and agricultural centers across the world. Companies specializing in water technology export equipment, expertise, and operational models to governments managing limited natural resources. These developments align with the biblical theme of Israel acting as a source of blessing. The influence is practical rather than symbolic. It is expressed through technology, innovation, and strategic knowledge. While this does not represent a complete fulfillment of the passages in Genesis or Deuteronomy, it fits the pattern of outward impact those texts anticipate. The connection between Israel's internal restoration and its external influence is consistent with the prophetic sequence. As the land becomes productive and the population grows, the nation's capacity to contribute to global challenges increases. The developments in water technology are not isolated achievements. They are part of a broader movement in which Israel assumes a role that affects other nations directly. This pattern strengthens the cumulative structure formed by the earlier passages. Isaiah describes the transformation of the land. Ezekiel describes the land producing fruit again. The modern era adds another dimension: Israel supplying solutions to nations facing environmental and agricultural pressure. These outcomes raise an important consideration. If Israel's advancements align with the early stages of the prophetic pattern, then the broader structure may also be entering motion. The next section evaluates this possibility by examining how these signs function within the larger prophetic timeline. The developments in Israel do not represent the full fulfillment of any single prophetic passage. Scripture describes outcomes that extend far beyond present conditions. However, the patterns now visible align with the early stages recorded by the prophets. These alignments deserve close attention because they appear in the same order the biblical text presents. The first stage is the restoration of the land. Isaiah speaks of deserts becoming productive. Isaiah 41 speaks of water appearing in regions without natural supply. Ezekiel 36 speaks of fruit returning to areas that were once abandoned. These movements are now observable in measurable form. Land that had little value is being cultivated. Water systems have altered long-standing limitations. Agricultural output is rising in territories once considered unusable. The second stage involves the return of the people. Ezekiel links the land's renewed productivity with the arrival of the nation. Israel continues to experience population growth through aliyah from multiple regions. The connection between returning populations and expanding agriculture stands out because Ezekiel treats the two movements as related. Modern data reflects this relationship. The third stage concerns influence. Genesis and Deuteronomy anticipate Israel holding a position that allows it to benefit other nations. Israel's current leadership in water management and desert agriculture fits this direction. The influence is practical, measurable, and recognized internationally. These factors create a pattern. Land renewal, population return, and external influence appear together in the biblical sequence. They are appearing together again today. None of this establishes a definitive prophetic moment. It does, however, indicate that developments long described as prerequisites for later chapters are taking shape. Scripture places major prophetic events, such as the national revival in Ezekiel 37, the northern alignment in Ezekiel 38, and the future crisis around Jerusalem in Zechariah 12, after the renewal of the land. The land moves first. The people gather next. Other events follow. If the land is already moving and the people are already returning, then the foundation of the prophetic sequence is forming. The present developments should therefore be viewed not as isolated achievements, but as part of a broader progression. The signs in the land are early indicators. They point to a structure larger than themselves, and they suggest that the timeline described by the prophets may be entering a new stage of visibility. The current developments in Israel form a sequence that parallels the structure found in Scripture. Each movement contributes to a broader picture. None of these elements stand alone. They gain significance when viewed together. Isaiah 35 describes a desert increasing in productivity. That shift is underway. Regions that once produced nothing now support agriculture. The change is documented in harvest data, infrastructure reports, and satellite records. Isaiah 41 describes water appearing in places that had no natural capacity to hold it. This is no longer theoretical. Water now moves through engineered systems across the Negev and supports areas that were previously without supply. The presence of water in these regions is measurable and consistent. Ezekiel 36 describes land that was abandoned becoming cultivable again. It also links this restoration to the return of the people. Both movements are visible today. Formerly unused terrain is now part of Israel's agricultural network, and the population continues to increase through ongoing waves of immigration. Genesis 12 introduces the idea of Israel serving as a source of benefit to the nations. Deuteronomy 28 adds the expectation of national leadership. Israel's advancements in water management, irrigation, and desert agriculture have placed the nation in a position that influences global systems. Countries facing water scarcity now look to Israel for solutions. This aligns with the direction these passages outline. These developments do not complete any prophetic chapter. They do not resolve the events that appear later in Scripture. However, they demonstrate that the early stages of the prophetic pattern, the movements that must occur before larger events take shape, are now visible. The land is responding. The population is returning. The nation is contributing outward. These conditions form the foundation for the later chapters recorded by the prophets. When these foundational elements shift, the broader structure becomes easier to observe. This does not call for speculation. It calls for awareness. The changes in Israel's land are real, measurable, and aligned with the order presented in Scripture. When the land moves, prophecy moves. And right now, the land of Israel is moving.